Africa's unemployment rate shows no sign of slowing, and it is, in fact, edging up to levels last seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. Yesterday, it ticked up by 0.6 percentage points to 33.5% in the second quarter of the year, while 92,000 people joined the labor force over the 3 months. More was needed to offset the 158 jobs that were lost in the quarter. The number of people discouraged from looking for work has increased by 4.8%, or 147,000 people. Let's now get more insights on these figures with Paul Byrne, who is from the Stepstone group, and they've worked together with the Career Junction, looking at the employment insights as well. So we'll be looking at their report as well. Paul, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Good to be with you, Aldrin. Thank you.
Yeah, I just quickly want to look at the Career Junction stats that came out, and the expectation was that hiring activity in the second quarter 2024 has seen a slight uptake of plus 5% compared to the first quarter of 2024. And I just want to juxtapose that to some of the expectations from economists heading into this announcement from the data that was released by Stats SA, is that the numbers that Stats SA has announced actually came as a surprise, because their expectation was that there could be a slight increase in the employment figures.
Aldrin, yes, it's an interesting sentiment, but I think we've got to look at the life cycle, the natural life cycle of how things work out. Recruitment and hiring activity has to happen before employment can come on board. So when we're looking at the data from our second quarter report that we've just published ourselves, and we're showing that 5% quarter-on-quarter uptick in hiring activity, it still has that lag effect before people actually go through the interview process and then are confirmed into employment. So I don't think the economists are wrong. I just think that the timing in actual fact is such that we will see recruitment picking up now that we're moving beyond that second quarter. And let's not forget that the second quarter itself, in actual fact, was quite a difficult part of the year. We are, or have been, in an election season. So I think that 5% uptick is still pretty positive, and ultimately we will see that transfer into hopefully some more jobs created, more people put into formal employment again.
Yeah, I just quickly want to go to the Business Day's front page. Today, the jobless numbers hit record high, or hits a record, and the reference that is being made is that with the improvement around electricity availability, and also which means that there could be an increase in production, the expectation was that we could see an increase in employment. When you look at the data that you have out, is there any correlation at all between load shedding and the availability of electricity, and also the availability of job vacancies being advertised?
In very broad strokes, yes, we can see that. And I think if you go back to the data and we're comparing year on year data, we'll see that the greater impact of load shedding and high interest rates, low consumer spending, supply chain congestion, all those headwinds that have faced us over the last 12 months really have manifested in us having hiring activity at 7.2% less in the second quarter this year compared to where we were in the second quarter last year. So I think absolutely there is that correlation, that business confidence has been down. And when business confidence is down, companies are not likely to be hiring. And again, I go back to my point about us being in this election cycle, because in addition to all of those headwinds that I've just spoken about, we've seen over various cycles through different elections over the decades, that there's always the slowdown in hiring activity as companies literally just take that moment to step back and wait to see what the outcomes of elections are going to be.
Well, so meaning that considering that the president will be meeting Business for South Africa today, and with the business sector speaking about the government of national unity, what their priorities are, that we possibly might see an uptake and a more build up in the confidence of business. But with the lack of confidence that was shown ahead of the elections, you compare that to, for instance, the data that you have, which shows that when you look at the number of people that are seeking jobs, you have an increase there, and the number of people that are submitting their CVs as well. So more activity around there, whereas there is a low business confidence.
Yeah, very much so. So again, let's go back to that point of saying, because I think it is so important that we look for the positive points out of any of the data that we've got access to. So again, when we're looking at quarter-on-quarter growth, we spoke about the fact that we are seeing that 5% uptick in hiring activity. And really where that's come in is across areas like business and management, which is up 7% in terms of hiring activity quarter-on-quarter. Finance roles are up 9%, and IT roles are up 4%. And then when we go back to your question in terms of that job seeker engagement, what really that's showing is that there are more people engaged back in the market right now, just in terms of those people that are applying for jobs. And the good news that comes out of that is that means that there are more skills becoming available to companies. And hopefully what that then translates into is quicker times to hire. So in other words, companies can find the right people to start sooner rather than later and really get back into the business of doing business.
Yep.
And then specifically looking at those roles that I've spoken about, again, the admin sector, we are seeing that there is a 17% improvement in that engagement that I'm talking about. Business and management has showed also 17%. Finance has showed a 15% improvement in engagement. And those IT roles that I was referring to are job seekers in those fields are up 39% in terms of their engagement. So that is showing some substantial growth. And again, I do think, with everything that is sort of moving in the right direction at the moment here in South Africa, I'm expecting and I'm hoping that we will see that these early markers are good indicators of what's going to come in the next couple of quarters.
Yeah, and with those CVs, of course, comes the question around skills that are available in the country. And the point that is made in the Stats SA data, which is a point that has been proven over and over again, that when you have a large pool of people that don't have a post-matric qualification, that pool really struggles to find employment. What's your data telling you about the semi-skilled, unskilled labor, people that are part of the labor market force that are looking for work?
Yeah, that is a sad story, because I think I've frequently said that the problem that we've got in South Africa is not so much the let me be careful of how I say this. It's not an unemployment problem that we've got. It is the creation of the right skills that's the problem. We're just not training our youngsters into the right kind of jobs that are going to allow them to meaningfully participate in our economy. And that's where we have to have a huge amount of focus. So our data, when we're looking at it, we can see that there are a number of and high volumes of people that literally are applying for whatever opportunities they think that they might have an opportunity to get into, and then sort of put up their hands and say, I'm a quick learner, help me find a job. And that is a sad state of affairs, where really we've got to focus as a country, as a government, as private sector, on making sure that we're creating the right skills that are going to help us in the jobs of the future. Because we know the conversations that are on the go at the moment are about how rapidly jobs are changing. So we can't be sorting out problems to solve today's issues right now. What I'm hoping is going to happen is the powers that be that are meeting to talk about their jobs economy are looking down the line to say, what are we going to need in 3 years' time? What are we going to need in 5 years' time? What happens over the next 2 decades? How do we need to be building our workforce and making sure that the youth that are coming into the market today are appropriately skilled with the right kind of tools to be able to perform into this and to be absorbed into the future economy?
Yeah, just quickly want to go back to the Stats SA data. If we look at long-term unemployment, we've also seen an increase there over the past 10 years. It was at around 3.4 million in the second quarter of 2014. It has shot up to 6.4 million in the second quarter of 2024. What does this tell us? And again, the point that we stressed before is that these are people, of course, that are unemployed, but these are warm bodies that would need electricity, warm bodies that would need water, warm bodies that would need sanitation facilities, warm bodies that would need access to government services. So how do we cater to this particular market that has been out of work for more than 12 years, because that's what long-term unemployment refers to?
Absolutely. And naturally what happens is they become completely discouraged. They're not even looking for work in a lot of cases anymore, because it's just been a hopeless battle for them. And what we've got to look at is those basic work programs that are going to help get them back into the workplace, to start building the confidence and actually give them some form of meaningful responsibility that's going to help build confidence and get them back into the entire work cycle. And I think it's incredibly difficult for any individual that hasn't been employed for a while to actually get back into that economy. Self-confidence plays a massive role here, but then there's also a look at certainly as we get into the more formal sector, how quickly things are changing right now. So if I've been out of work or not sort of been consciously applying for jobs for whatever reason for a period of time, the chances are the world's actually moved on quite rapidly. So I've got to play catch up then in terms of what skills I've got, how I'm going to approach the market, and that's a difficult place to start from. And it takes a lot of effort and a lot of willpower to actually get back into that cycle.
Yeah, and your data again speaking about artificial intelligence skills in the workplace, so that's also changing. And has an impact, of course, around how an employer would decide that looking at the cost of doing business, and you have software that is available that somewhat would displace somebody who is employed. But there's also the question around efficiency. So I would get an efficient productivity level out of an AI software compared to having a warm body there. What's happening in the business sector in terms of the discussions around seeing more and more companies taking up AI?
It's a very interesting conversation. Again, one that we've got to really keep a careful eye on here, or globally for that matter. What our data is showing us is that over the last 3 years, so if I'm comparing the second quarter of 2021 to what we've just seen now in the second quarter of 24, the rate of jobs that are looking for AI skills has increased by 94%. So that is a considerable growth in terms of what businesses are looking for. And it's specifically around things like machine learning, predictive modeling, artificial intelligence. Those are the type of things that we can see are really starting to tick up quite a lot. And it's job seekers that are in the space of data analysis and data warehousing, software development, systems and network administration. And very interestingly, Aldrin, even teaching. Those are the areas that we're actually seeing that a lot of these skills have come up. So we're watching that quite carefully in terms of actually seeing what's going to do and what's going to translate from there. But then when we look, and we've recently participated in a rather large survey globally with our parent group, Stepstone, that we were talking about earlier. And in a list of countries, in South Africa, we're sitting at about 10%, sort of 10th place at the moment. We're looking at job seeker sort of perception of the impact of AI and specifically generative AI, where about 36% of those people that we interviewed across the survey, and there were over 7,500 South Africans that participated in this, we're saying that the belief that generative AI will have a significant impact on their jobs in the future. So again, this is a little bit of a sort of scary place, and it goes back to the point that I was making a little bit earlier about saying, those people that have been out of the workplace are needing to start to play catch up now, because these are the things that are coming in, starting to change quite rapidly. And people are going to have to keep themselves upskilled in terms of these developments in order to stay in the roles that they're in, move into the roles that they need to move into as business requirements change, or very importantly, get back into that workplace.
And as the world of work is also changing, South Africa recently passed the nomad visa regulations, and this is when we speak about the so-called gig economy. What impact do you think that will have on South Africa's ability to attract, for instance, the right skills, but also at the same time, how South Africa is able to hone its own skills to be part of the gig economy?
It's a very interesting question that you've got there, Aldrin, because I think they're the positives and the negatives of that. The gig economy and the whole concept of remote working has put a completely different pressure on our brain drain. And we've spoken about this quite significantly over the last couple of years, specifically post-COVID, when we just saw how remote work opportunities absolutely mushroomed. And suddenly we found that it was not just immigration that we were dealing with in terms of brain drain, but now we had companies in other countries that were targeting our skills, potentially to remain in South Africa, but to work for those organizations overseas. And the problem in my mind that creates is that once you've actually lost someone to the possibility of a foreign income or the opportunity to one day move overseas because now they're working for these companies, it's very difficult to bring that person or that skill back on shore here into South Africa. So I think it's very important that we have these changes in regulations so we can encourage other foreign workers to come into South Africa, and whether in actual fact they are delivering their services from South Africa to companies overseas, the important thing is that they are then in South Africa spending money here and aiding our economy. On top of that, then naturally what will happen is that they'll start to pass on some of the skills that they've got as they sort of get into networks and they're talking to like-minded colleagues in the work, be it in the workplace, coffee shop, wherever it is that they're meeting up with other people. And that for us is an important move in terms of, let's call it the globalization of skills. And we've got to see more and more of that happening. But we've got to just be mindful of the fact that we've got a lot of people, specifically within the IT sectors, what our data has shown us, and within the finance sector that have been taking on these remote opportunities. The IT sector has kind of dropped off a little bit over recent times. And I think from our report, we were showing that IT hiring activity has dropped, I think it was 21% year on year. That is on account of, again, this rapid escalation we had during the period of COVID for IT skills in the market, and specifically software developers. And then now, over the last 2 years, we've seen a complete softening of that. I think as organizations have developed the tools that they needed, they've got what they needed in terms of the software that they've now produced, and now it's just back down to the maintenance of those technologies. So we saw some significant layoffs across the globe in terms of the IT sector. And again, I make the point to say, as much as we saw that significant layoff, what in actual fact has happened is that it's still very much a sought after skill here in South Africa. And again, our data is showing that the positive result of this is that we've got that 4% uptick in terms of the hiring activity over the quarter on quarter.
Thank you so much for your time. Paul Byrne there is from Stepstone Group. Just listen to that, 6.4 million people who've never worked over the past 12 years.